discuss in this cross applications. So as part of our syllabus is concerned, this cross application contains these topics, RFCs, then we'll have BAPIs, then we'll have Idocs, then we'll be discussing LSMW using Idoc and BAPI. Then we'll be discussing what enhancements. Okay, so as part of this enhancements, we'll be discussing the customer exits. We'll discuss baddies, and then we'll be discussing the enhancement framework. Okay, so these are the topics we are going to discuss as part of this cross application. So the duration we require is around 35 to 40 hours. Between 35 to 40 hours we require, and the classes will be from Monday to Friday. Okay, Monday to Friday, and whatever we discuss in the live session, we'll be sending the daily emails. Okay, which includes what the programs, notes, what are the notes is required, that notes, and if any diagrams are there, everything will be sent through what emails. Okay, so you need not take anything during the live session, just focus on the session. And apart from this, we'll be giving the video recordings for preview access, during the course. Okay, during the course, and these recordings will be sharing twice a week. Okay, so I may not share it on a daily basis because I need to do the conversion. So in case if I am able to do it on the same day, I'll share it on the same day. Otherwise, we'll share it twice a week. Suppose Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday recording, I may share it by Wednesday evening. Again, Thursday, Friday, I'll be sharing it on Friday evening. Something like that, twice a week. But I'll try to share it on a daily basis, but I cannot guarantee because I'll be having other batches also. For each conversion, it requires around 1.5 hours to 2 hours. Okay, so this is only the additional service. Okay, video recordings for the preview access during the course. This will be shared twice a week, but the daily emails will be which contains what programs, notes, and what diagrams. Okay, and to do this cross applications, okay, we have some prerequisites. It is understood that we already know the basic ABAP. Okay, so we assume that we are already into ABAP and we'll be starting this. So when I say basic ABAP, we are expected to know how to work with internal tables, okay, function modules, okay, subroutines, okay, internal tables, function modules, subroutines, and how to write the select queries, okay, select queries, and then we are expected to know what module pool programming. Module pool programming means nothing but dialog programming. So these are the prerequisites to get into this particular cross application. So we assume that already we know all these things, and based on this, we'll be directly starting with what cross applications, right? So again, we will not focus on what is internal table, what is function models. Okay, these are all comes under what basic ABAP. We directly get into this particular concepts. So as part of today, I'll just give the overview of what all this is. The actual programming part, the technical part, I'll start from what tomorrow onwards. Okay, so today we'll just quickly understand what are the things we are going to discuss in this RFCs, BAPIs, all those things. Okay, so this is the overall schedule. Any questions on this? If anyone is having any questions, you can ask.
Yeah, this is KK here, Krishna Kishore.
Yeah, Kishore, tell me.
So before the, as you said, the prerequisites of the basic ABAP, as I don't know anything about the ABAP part.
Correct.
So
So my suggestion is, as you told, you are from a functional background. So my
Yeah.
suggestion is first you have to get into this particular basic ABAP. Okay. So
Yeah.
once you are good in this, then you can go for this cross applications. Okay.
Okay.
But today
Okay.
what you do is just go through the session so that
Ah,
you'll understand how the online mode will be there. Okay. So
okay. Okay.
probably in the evening I'll speak to you. Then we'll have a plan on this basic ABAP.
Done. Done. Done.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Fine. You can mute your speakers, Kishore. Yeah, fine. Done. So first, let us start with this concepts. What is RFC? What is BAPI? All those things. Okay. So if you take this RFC, RFC stands for what? Remote function call. Remote function call. So as part of our basic ABAP, we already know how to work with what function models. We know how to work with standard function models, and we know how to create our own function models and call that particular function models. Okay. So what is basically a function model? It is a block of statements. It is a set of statements which is defined only once and can be called what any number of times. So it increases what reusability. So as part of our basic ABAP, we come across what many standard function models. Sometimes you will have a requirement to create what our own function models and then call that function models at what different places. Okay, now what exactly is this remote function call is, how it is different from a normal function model is, we can classify this function model into basically into what two things. One is normal function model, another is what remote function model. So whatever we know as part of the basic ABAP, we just call it as what a normal function model. So what is the meaning of this? Suppose assume that, try to understand this. Don't take anything, everything I'll send it through email. So this is our what SAP system. Assume that this is on SAP server, SAP server 1. Okay, so as part of this we'll develop a function model. Okay, it can be a standard function model or a custom function model. So assume that I'll develop a custom function model, something ZF1. I'll provide some business logic in that. So this is the definition of my function model. So as we already know, where do we develop the function models? In function builder tool in SC37. Okay, so in SC37 in the attributes tab, we have to tell whether this is a normal function model or whether it is a remote function model. By default, normal radio button will be what selected. So assume that this is a normal function model. Okay, right. Now assume that we are having another client here. So this is again SAP server 1, or assume like this. Assume this is SAP server 1 and this client is what 800 client. So we'll develop this function in one of the client. So assume that this is 800 client. Now within the same server, so when I say within the same server, this is also the same server 1. Okay, assume that this is 800 client or any other client. It can be the same client or it can be different client in the same server. Now, how do we call a function model? What is the signature? What is the statement we use for calling the function model? We'll say call function. What is the function model name in our case? ZF1. Okay, ZF1. And if any parameters are there, we'll be passing the import parameters, export, all those things. So we'll be calling the function model. So this is the way to call a normal function model. So whenever we call a function model, what happens? Control jumps to what? Definition of the function model. The logic of the function model gets what? Executed. So this is the behavior of what? Normal function model. Now assume that, okay, we are having another SAP server. So assume that this is another SAP server. This is SAP server 2. Okay, so already there is one function model which is developed in the server 1. What is the name of the function model? ZFM1. Now, and this function model is marked as, is registered as what? Normal function model. So what I'll do, I'll try to call this. One second, please. One second. So this is SAP Server 1. Now assume that this is SAP Server 2. Okay, this is SAP Server 2. So what I'll do here, I'll try to call that particular function model. So here I'll say this is SAP Server 2. I'll try to call it. How do you call function? What is the name of the function model? ZFM1. Where this function model is available in another SAP server. So when I try to do like this, it will give what? Error. Means I cannot, what is the meaning here? I cannot call normal function models from other SAP server. Okay, so this is invalid. Okay, this is invalid. I cannot call the normal function model from other SAP server. So what is the meaning here? A normal function model can be called from within the same server from any of the clients. From any of the clients, but it should be from what? Same server. So my requirement is I want to develop a function model, and that function model I should able to call it. I should able to call from the same server as well as what other SAP server. So assume that this is the SAP server 1. Okay, SAP server 1 and some client. Okay, I'll develop a function model here ZFM2 end function. Okay, but I'll flag this function model. I will register this function model as what? Remote function model. So how do we register? In SC37 in the function builder tool, we have the attributes tab. In the attributes tab, we'll select the radio button what? Remote. Okay, so assume that I flagged it as what? Remote function model. So what is the concept of remote function model? It can be called from what? Same server as well as from what? Different server. So assume that we have two different servers here. So this is SAP server 1. Okay, and this is, assume that this is SAP server 2. Okay, so if I am calling it from the same server, if I'm calling it from the same server, what I have to do, I have to simply say call function, what is that? ZFM2. So when I say call function ZFM2, control jumps to the definition of this function model, and this function model gets what? Executed. Now my requirement is what? I want to call it from a different SAP server. So what you will do here, you will say call function ZFM2. If I leave it like this, it will check for that function model within the same server, but it is available in what? Another SAP server. So what we will do, before calling this function model, we will create something called as Rfc Destination. Okay, in SM59 we will create something called about Rfc Destination, and we will try to call that particular function model. So while calling that remote function model, we have to say destination followed by what? Rfc Destination. So how to create this Rfc Destination we will understand when we go to that Rfc topic. So I can call it now. So before calling this, what I have to do, I need to, one second, before calling this function model, what I have to do, I need to what? Create the Rfc destination and specify that Rfc destination while calling the remote function model. So it will check for that function model inside this particular server. So this Rfc destination will hold the details of what? Rfc server. Understood? We will be creating something called the Rfc destination, which will store the details of what? Rfc server. What do you mean by Rfc server here? It is a system where the remote function model is what? Existing. So this is a difference between a normal function model and what? Remote function model. Normal function model means it can be accessed from the same SAP server. Remote function model means it can be accessed from the same server as well as a different SAP server. Okay, so RFC is nothing but what? Calling a function model which is available in what? Remote SAP server. So this function models, these remote function models, I can call it in different ways. We have something called as synchronous RFC, asynchronous RFC, transactional RFC. So we'll be seeing all those things, the differences, all those things when we move on to the practical part. Okay, so this is the overall outline of what? RFC. Any questions on this? Please ask me.
Other than SAP, we will have an RFCs, no?
Yeah, I'll come to that point, Kishore. The next thing,
Yeah,
I'll come to that point. Yeah.
yeah. You can call me KK rather than Kishore. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, fine. Yeah, others, any doubts on this? Rajesh, no? Right. Okay. Right. So this is the concept of what? RFCs. So again, as I told you, this remote function models, I can call it in multiple ways: synchronous, asynchronous, and transactional RFC. So that part we'll be discussing later on. Yeah, what is the next thing here? BAPIs. So BAPIs stands for what? Business Application Programming Interface. Okay, BAPIs stands for Business Application Programming Interface. So what is the meaning of this BAPIs? Yeah. So see this. So this is about RFC. Yeah. So assume that we have an SAP server here. Okay, this is my SAP server. SAP server 1. Okay, so as part of this, assume that I'll develop one function model, ZFM1, and here also what? End function, done. And I'll register this function model as what? Remote function model. But while developing a remote function model, while developing this particular function model, I'll follow something called as BAPI standards. Okay, so assume that this is remote function model. But as I told you, while developing this particular function model, there is something called as BAPI standard. So what are those things? Just ignore for the time being. So I am calling it as what? BAPI function model. Okay, why I am calling it as BAPI function model is I am going to follow what? Something called as BAPI standards. So there are some 5 to 6 standards which we need to follow. By following that standards, I'll develop that particular function model. Since I'm following that standards, I'm calling it as what? BAPI function model. So for the time being, I assume that this is also what? Remote function model. So what is the concept of remote function model? I can call it from what? Same server, or I can call it from what? Different SAP server. So I assume that this is my different SAP server, SAP server 2. So how do you call this? You will say what? Call function ZFM1. And as I told you, while calling, before calling, we have to create what? Rfc destination, and we have to specify that particular Rfc destination. So whenever I call the remote function model, control jumps to what? Control jumps to remote function, and that function model gets what? Executed. So assume that as part of your business, as part of your customer business, okay, he is also maintaining some non-SAP system. He is also maintaining what? Some non-SAP system. So assume that this is my non-SAP system, which is running on what? Assume that this is a Java application, or assume that this is a .NET application, or other than what? SAP. Okay, other than SAP. Right. Now, what my customer wants is, so we develop one function model here, which is performing some business task. Try to understand. I develop this function model, which is performing some business task. So my customer requirement is, he wants to execute this business functionality from what? Non-SAP system. Already there is one function model which is performing some business task, and this function model we have developed using what? ABAP language, and we mark it as what? Remote function model. Remote means what? I can call it from the same server or what? Different SAP servers. But my requirement is what? I need to call it, I need to access that functionality from what? Non-SAP system. But I cannot directly call this because this is non-SAP system. This is this is a ABAP function model. So I cannot directly call. So what we have to do is we need to develop something called as API method. Again, how to develop it is a different discussion. We'll be seeing it in the practical part. So we'll be developing what? An API method. Okay. This API method will be creating on top of what? Created on top of what? Our BAPI function model. Created on top of BAPI function model. Okay, so we'll be creating the API method. So what this API method will do? This API method will call this particular what? Function module. Okay, this API method will internally call this particular function model developed in what? ABAP. And this API method, I need to call it from what? Non-SAP system. So what I'm trying to say is, I cannot call that ABAP function model directly from what? Non-SAP system. On top of that function model, we need to create what? API method, and then access that API method from what? Non-SAP system. So this is the difference between what? RFC and what? BAPI. Okay, so what I can say is every BAPI must be RFC, every BAPI must be RFC, but every RFC need not be BAPI. Okay, every BAPI must be RFC, but every RFC need not be what? BAPI. So you understood the concept here? So if you want to access it from non-SAP system, directly I cannot call the remote function model. First of all, we need to develop this remote function model by following what? BAPI standards. Okay, and that function will be call it as what? BAPI function model. Since this function model is developed in ABAP language, I cannot directly invoke it from what? Non-SAP system. So by using something called as BOB, Business Object Builder, SWO1, okay, we'll be creating what? API method. Okay, API method will always be created on top of what? BAPI function model, and this API method will be called in what? Non-SAP system from the by the legacy programmer. See, actually, we are what? ABAP consultant. So it is not our job to call this API method. Our job will end here only. Our job is only to create the API method. But how to call it from? How to call that API method from non-SAP system? It is a job of what? Legacy programmer, means non-ABAP programmer. Because we don't know how to develop a program in Java, how to develop a program in .NET. We are what? ABAP background, right? So our job will end here only, just creating the API method, and then we need to prepare what? Technical specs containing the information about that particular API method. That technical specs we will provide it to what? The legacy programmer. By referring to the technical specs, he will develop the legacy application to invoke that particular API method, which will internally call what? Our BAPI function. So this is the difference between a BAPI and what? RFC. Every BAPI must be RFC, but every RFC need not be what? BAPI. So any questions, please answer.
No, it's clear.
Clear, right? The others? Okay, done. Right. So this is about what BAPI. Next, we have something called as what? ALE Idocs.